The Washington family was just 10 minutes out of Pine Ridge when James saw the flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror. His heart sank as he realized the police car was following him. He quickly checked his speedometer. He was driving exactly the speed limit, maybe even a little under. His hands were steady on the wheel, but inside he felt that familiar knot forming in his stomach. "Why are we stopping, Dad?" Zoe asked from the back seat, noticing her father putting on the turn signal. "Just a routine traffic stop, sweetheart," James said calmly, though his voice carried a slight tension. "Everyone stay calm and quiet, okay?" Lisa looked over at her husband with concern. They both knew this feeling all too well. The anxiety that came whenever they encountered law enforcement while simply living their lives. James had experienced it countless times, even as a federal agent himself. The irony wasn't lost on him. James pulled over to the side of the quiet mountain road and put the car in park. He placed his hands clearly on the steering wheel where they could be seen and took a deep breath. Through his side mirror, he watched as a young police officer stepped out of the patrol car and began walking toward them. Officer Morrison looked to be in his late 20s, with short blonde hair and a serious expression. He approached the driver's side window with his hand resting on his belt, his movements deliberate and authoritative. James rolled down his window and waited. "License and registration," Morrison said without any greeting or explanation for the stop. "Of course, officer," James replied politely. "May I ask why you pulled us over? I believe I was driving within the speed limit." Morrison's expression hardened. "Just get your license and registration. Now." James noticed the officer's tone was unnecessarily aggressive, but he remained calm. "My license is in my wallet in my back pocket and the registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them slowly, okay? Hurry up," Morrison snapped. As James carefully reached for his wallet, he could feel his children's eyes on him from the back seat. Tyler was clutching his stuffed animal tighter, while Zoe had gone completely quiet. Lisa sat tense in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap. James handed over his documents, noting that his hands were completely steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Years of law enforcement training had taught him how to stay calm under pressure, but this felt different. This felt personal. Morrison examined the license for what seemed like an unusually long time before walking back to his patrol car. James watched him in the mirror, seeing him speaking into his radio. The officer was taking much longer than necessary for a simple license check. "Dad, what's taking so long?" Tyler whispered. "I don't know, buddy," James replied quietly. "Just stay calm." Lisa reached over and squeezed James's hand. They had both hoped their children would never have to experience something like this, but here they were, trying to protect their kids' innocence while dealing with what felt like harassment. After several more minutes, Morrison returned, but this time he wasn't alone. A second patrol car had arrived, and another officer was getting out. James felt his concern growing. This was escalating far beyond what should have been a simple traffic stop. The second officer was older, probably in his 40s, with graying hair and a stockier build. His name tag read Coleman, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had been doing this job for a long time. But there was something in his approach that made James's law enforcement instincts kick in. This wasn't standard procedure. "Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle," Morrison said, his hand moving to his weapon. "Officer, can you please tell me what this is about?" James asked, keeping his voice steady. "We're just a family on vacation. Is there some kind of problem?" "I said step out of the vehicle," Morrison repeated, his voice getting louder. Coleman approached the passenger side and tapped on Lisa's window. She rolled it down, her heart pounding. "Ma'am, you and the children need to get out of the car as well," Coleman said. "Why?" Lisa asked, trying to keep her voice calm for the children's sake. "What's going on?" "Just do as you're told," Coleman replied curtly. James made eye contact with his wife through the rearview mirror. They both knew they had no choice but to comply, even though this felt completely wrong. James opened his door slowly and stepped out, keeping his hands visible at all times. "Dad?" Zoe's voice was small and scared as she watched her father being ordered around by the police officers. "It's okay, honey. James said over his shoulder. Just listen to your mom. Lisa helped the children out of the car, Tyler still clutching his stuffed animal. They stood together on the side of the road, watching as the officers began to search their vehicle without explanation. Officer, can you please tell me what this is about? James asked again, maintaining his professional composure despite his growing frustration. You haven't told me why you stopped us or why you're searching our car. Morrison looked up from where he was going through their luggage. Your vehicle matches the description of one involved in a break-in this morning. James felt a surge of disbelief. What kind of break-in? Our car is a dark blue SUV. That's one of the most common vehicles on the road. Silver SUV, dark SUV, close enough, Coleman said dismissively as he continued searching. Lisa felt anger rising in her chest. She pulled out her phone and started recording, trying to document what was happening to her family. Ma'am, put that phone away, Coleman ordered. I have a right to record this, Lisa said firmly, though her hands were shaking. You're interfering with police business, Morrison said, moving toward her. James stepped slightly forward, his protective instincts kicking in. Officer, she's not interfering. She's standing well back and not obstructing your search. The situation was becoming more tense by the minute. Other cars were slowing down as they passed, their occupants staring at the scene. James felt humiliated, knowing that to everyone driving by he looked like a criminal being detained with his family. The officers were making a mess of their carefully packed vacation supplies. Clothes were scattered on the ground, Tyler's toys were being tossed around, and Zoe's tablet had been roughly handled. James watched as months of planning and excitement were being destroyed on the side of the road. Please be careful with our things, Lisa said quietly. We have medication in there that needs to stay cool. We'll handle this however we need to, Coleman replied without looking up. Tyler started crying quietly, overwhelmed by seeing his parents being treated this way. Zoe put her arm around her little brother, trying to comfort him while fighting back her own tears. James felt his professional training warring with his natural instincts as a father and husband. Every fiber of his being wanted to assert his authority, to show these officers his federal credentials and end this harassment immediately. But something held him back. Perhaps it was wanting to see how far this would go, or maybe it was the hope that they would realize their mistake and let his family continue their vacation in peace. 20 minutes had passed since they were first pulled over, and James knew this was far beyond any reasonable traffic stop. His family was being humiliated and harassed, and he was powerless to stop it without revealing who he really was. The officers continued their search, finding nothing suspicious because there was nothing to find. They were just a family going on vacation. But somehow that simple truth seemed impossible for these officers to accept. The situation on the mountain road was getting worse by the minute. What had started as a simple traffic stop was now turning into something much more serious. James stood watching as the two officers continued searching through his family's belongings, throwing their vacation clothes and personal items around like they were looking for hidden treasure. Coleman walked over to James with a serious look on his face. Sir, I need you to put your hands behind your back. What? Why? James asked, genuinely confused. You haven't found anything because there's nothing to find. We're just a family on vacation. You're being detained for further questioning, Coleman said, pulling out his handcuffs. Lisa gasped from where she stood with the children. Detained for what? You still haven't told us what we supposedly did wrong. Morrison looked up from the car with an annoyed expression. Ma'am, your husband is being uncooperative and suspicious. We have every right to detain him. James felt his heart racing, but he forced himself to stay calm. Officer, I've been completely cooperative. I've answered all your questions and allowed you to search our vehicle. How exactly am I being uncooperative? Don't argue with me, Coleman snapped as he moved to put the handcuffs on James. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Now, Tyler started crying harder when he saw his dad being handcuffed. Mom, why are they hurting Daddy? They're not hurting him, baby, Lisa said, trying to keep her voice steady even though her own hands were shaking. Daddy's okay. But Lisa knew this was far from okay. She had never seen her husband look so helpless, and it broke her heart. James was one of the strongest, most confident men she knew. and watching him be treated like a criminal was almost unbearable. "Can I at least comfort my children?" James asked as Coleman finished putting on the handcuffs. "They're scared." "You should have thought about that before you decided to act suspicious," Morrison said coldly. Zoe was trying hard not to cry, but tears were streaming down her face. She had never seen her father handcuffed before, and she didn't understand why these police officers were being so mean to her family. In school, they had always taught her that police officers were the good guys who helped people. "Dad, what did we do wrong?" she asked in a small voice. "Nothing, sweetheart," James said, trying to sound reassuring even with his hands cuffed behind his back. "We didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes there are just misunderstandings." Coleman opened the back door of his patrol car. "Get in." James looked back at his family one more time before getting into the police car. Lisa was holding both children close to her, and all three of them looked terrified. This was supposed to be the happiest day of their vacation, and instead it was turning into a nightmare. From inside the patrol car, James could see his family standing on the side of the road. Other cars continued to slow down as they passed, and he could see people pointing and staring. Some were even taking pictures with their phones. He felt completely humiliated, knowing that to everyone driving by, he looked like a criminal. Morrison called for another backup unit on his radio. "We need additional support out here. We've got a family acting suspiciously and the father is being uncooperative." Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Acting suspiciously? We were just driving to our vacation. How is that suspicious?" "Ma'am, you need to calm down," Coleman said. "Your attitude isn't helping your husband's situation." "My attitude?" Lisa felt her anger rising. "My attitude is that of a mother whose family is being harassed for no reason. We haven't done anything wrong, and you're treating my husband like he's some kind of dangerous criminal." A third police car arrived, and another officer got out. This was getting completely out of control. James watched from the patrol car as the new officer, a woman in her 30s, approached his wife and children. "Officer Hayes," she introduced herself to Lisa. "What seems to be the problem here?" Lisa felt a small surge of hope. Maybe this female officer would be more reasonable. "The problem is that your officers pulled us over for no good reason, searched our car without cause, and now they've handcuffed my husband. We're just a family trying to go on vacation." Officer Hayes looked around at the scene, the scattered belongings, the crying children, and James sitting in the back of the patrol car. Something about the situation didn't seem right to her either. Meanwhile, Morrison was going through James's wallet more thoroughly. He found credit cards, family photos, and various membership cards, but nothing suspicious. The registration and insurance papers for the rental car were all in order. Everything pointed to this being exactly what the family said it was. A normal family on vacation. "Find anything?" Coleman asked. "Nothing," Morrison admitted quietly. "Everything checks out clean," but instead of admitting their mistake, the officers seemed to double down. Coleman walked over to Lisa with an aggressive stance. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to search your purse as well." "You're going to search my purse?" "For what?" Lisa asked, incredulously. "We need to make sure you're not carrying anything dangerous," Coleman said. "Dangerous? I'm a nurse. The most dangerous thing in my purse is probably hand sanitizer," Lisa said, but she handed over her purse anyway because she felt like she had no choice. Tyler was now crying so hard he could barely breathe. The stress of seeing his parents treated this way was overwhelming for an 8-year-old. Zoe was trying to be brave for her little brother, but she was scared too. "Please," Zoe said to Officer Hayes. "My dad didn't do anything wrong. Can you please let him out of the car? He just wanted to take us to see the lake." Officer Hayes looked down at the young girl and felt her heart break a little. These children were clearly terrified, and she was starting to question whether her colleagues were handling this situation properly. James sat in the hot patrol car watching his family through the window. The handcuffs were cutting into his wrists, and he was getting angrier by the minute. He had spent his entire career in law enforcement, working to protect and serve the public, and now he was experiencing firsthand what it felt like to be on the wrong side of police harassment. He thought about all the times he had heard stories like this from other people in his community. Stories of families being stopped and searched for no reason, of good people being treated like criminals just because of how they looked. He had always believed that if people just cooperated and stayed calm, everything would work out fine. Now he was learning that sometimes cooperation and calmness weren't enough. More cars were slowing down to look at the scene. James could see people taking photos and videos with their phones. He wondered if this was going to end up on social media and what people would think when they saw it. Would they assume he had done something wrong? Would they think he deserved this treatment? Morrison finished searching Lisa's purse and found nothing but the usual things any mother would carry: tissues, lip balm, medications, snacks for the kids, and her work ID from the hospital. "Everything seems to be in order," Officer Hayes said quietly to Coleman. "Maybe we should consider letting them go." "Not yet," Coleman said firmly. "Something about this whole situation doesn't feel right to me." James couldn't hear what the officers were saying, but he could see them talking among themselves. He was starting to realize that this wasn't going to end quickly or easily. These officers seemed determined to find something wrong, even when there was clearly nothing to find. The mountain sun was getting hot, and James was starting to sweat in the back of the patrol car. His family looked tired and stressed standing on the side of the road. This was supposed to be their perfect vacation day, and instead, it was turning into the worst experience of their lives. James had been sitting in the back of the patrol car for over an hour, watching his family suffer on the side of the road. The handcuffs had left marks on his wrists, and the hot sun beating down on the police car was making him feel dizzy. He could see Tyler still crying in his mother's arms, while Zoe stood close by, trying to be brave but clearly terrified. Enough was enough. James had hoped this misunderstanding would resolve itself, but it was clear these officers had no intention of letting his family go. He watched as Coleman started walking toward Lisa again, and James knew he couldn't let this continue any longer. "Officer Coleman," James called out from the patrol car window. "I need to speak with you." Coleman walked over with an annoyed expression. "What now?" "I need to tell you something important," James said calmly. "Can you please let me out of the car for a moment?" "You can talk from right there," Coleman said dismissively. James took a deep breath. He had been hoping to avoid this moment, but his family's safety was more important than anything else. "Officer, I need to show you something in my wallet, something I think you missed." Morrison overheard the conversation and walked over. "We already went through your wallet, there's nothing there." "You need to look more carefully," James said. "In the fold behind my driver's license, there's another ID you need to see." Coleman looked suspicious. "What kind of ID?" "My federal credentials," James said quietly. "I'm a special agent with the FBI." The words hung in the air for a moment. Morrison's face went pale, and Coleman's confident expression suddenly changed to one of uncertainty. "You're lying," Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Check my wallet again," James said calmly. "Behind my driver's license, there's a federal ID and badge. My name is James Washington, and I've been with the Bureau for 15 years. Coleman's hands were shaking slightly as he pulled out James's wallet again. This time he looked more carefully. Behind the driver's license, folded neatly, was a leather credential case containing a federal identification card and a gold FBI badge. Morrison leaned in to look, and his face went completely white. "Oh no. Oh no, no, no." Coleman stared at the credentials for a long moment, reading James's name and seeing his photo on the official federal ID. The badge was real, and there was no mistaking what it meant. "Why didn't you tell us this earlier?" Coleman asked, his voice much quieter now. "Because I wanted to see how you would treat a regular family," James said, his voice steady but firm. "I wanted to see if you would do the right thing without knowing who I was, and now I have my answer." Officer Hayes had been watching the exchange from a distance, and she could tell something had changed. She walked over to see what was happening. "What's going on?" she asked. Coleman showed her the credentials, and Hayes's eyes widened. She looked from the badge to James sitting in the patrol car and then back to the badge again. "Agent Washington," she said respectfully. I am so sorry about this situation." "Don't apologize to me," James said. "Apologize to my wife and children, who have been standing on the side of the road for over an hour, watching their father be treated like a criminal." Morrison was pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. "This is bad. This is really bad. We messed up big time." "Yes." "You did," James said. "You stopped a federal agent and his family for no reason, searched our vehicle without probable cause, and detained me based on nothing but your own assumptions." Coleman quickly moved to unlock the handcuffs. "Agent Washington, we were just doing our job. We had reports of a break-in and your vehicle." "My vehicle was completely different from whatever description you had," James interrupted. "And even if it was similar, that doesn't give you the right to handcuff me and traumatize my children." As soon as the handcuffs were off, James stepped out of the patrol car and walked straight to his family. Lisa threw her arms around him and both children hugged him tightly. "Daddy, why did those police officers hurt you?" Tyler asked through his tears. "They made a mistake, son," James said gently, holding his children close. "Sometimes adults make mistakes, but that doesn't make it okay." Officer Hayes approached the family cautiously. "Agent Washington, ma'am, children, I want to personally apologize for what happened here today. This should never have occurred." Lisa looked at the female officer with a mix of anger and exhaustion. "An apology doesn't take back the last hour of our lives. My children will never forget seeing their father handcuffed like a criminal." "You're absolutely right," Hayes said. "And I want you to know that this incident will be fully investigated." Morrison and Coleman were standing a few feet away, looking like they wanted to disappear. They were both realizing the magnitude of what they had done. Not only had they wrongfully detained a federal agent, but they had done it in front of witnesses and in an age where everything gets recorded and shared online. James could see several people had stopped to watch the scene unfold, and he knew that videos of this incident were probably already being posted on social media. The last thing he wanted was for his family to become the center of a media storm, but he also knew that what happened here was wrong and needed to be addressed. "Agent Washington," Coleman said nervously, "is there anything we can do to make this right?" James looked at the officer for a long moment. "You can start by explaining to my children why they had to watch their father being treated like a criminal when we were just trying to go on vacation." Coleman looked down at Tyler and Zoe, both of whom were still clinging to their father. "Kids, we made a mistake. A big mistake. Your dad didn't do anything wrong, and we're sorry we scared you." "But why did you think he did something wrong?" Zoe asked innocently. "My dad helps people. He catches the real bad guys." The question hung in the air, and none of the officers seemed to know how to answer it. James knew exactly why they had assumed he was guilty, but he wasn't going to explain racial profiling to his 12-year-old daughter on the side of a mountain road. Hayes pulled out her radio and called her supervisor. "Sergeant Davis, we have a situation here that needs your immediate attention. We've had an incident involving a federal agent and his family." James could hear the supervisor's voice crackling through the radio, asking for details. Hayes walked away to have a private conversation, but James could see her gesturing and looking back at his family repeatedly. "What happens now?" Lisa asked, her husband quietly. "Now we document everything," James said. "We take pictures of our scattered belongings, we get the names and badge numbers of everyone involved, and we make sure this never happens to another family." Morrison was trying to clean up the mess they had made of the family's belongings, but the damage was done. Clothes were dirty, toys were broken, and their carefully packed vacation supplies were scattered everywhere. "Don't touch our things," Lisa said firmly. "You've done enough damage." James began taking photos with his phone, documenting the scene and the condition of their belongings. He was thinking like a federal agent now, gathering evidence and building a case. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived, including one with Sergeant Davis. James could see the supervisor talking urgently with Hayes, Morrison, and Coleman. The body language told him everything he needed to know. These officers were in serious trouble. As James helped his family repack their belongings, he realized that their vacation would never be the same. Even when they reached the lake, this experience would hang over them. But he also knew that speaking up about this incident might prevent other families from going through the same ordeal. The Washington family never made it to their cabin that first day. Instead, they spent the rest of the afternoon at the Pine Ridge police station, giving statements and filing formal complaints. James sat across from Sergeant Davis, a veteran officer who looked genuinely embarrassed by what his subordinates had done. "Agent Washington, I want you to know that this kind of behavior doesn't represent our department," Davis said, sliding an incident report across the desk. "We take these matters very seriously." James looked up from the paperwork he was filling out. "Sergeant, with all due respect, this happened in broad daylight on a busy road. If this is how your officers treat families when everyone can see them, I can only imagine what happens when no one is watching." In the lobby, Lisa sat with Tyler and Zoe, trying to explain to them why they were at a police station instead of swimming in the lake. Tyler was still confused about why the police officers had been mean to his daddy, while Zoe kept asking when they could finally start their vacation. "Are we in trouble, Mom?" Zoe asked quietly. "No, sweetheart, we're not in trouble," Lisa said, stroking her daughter's hair. "We're here to make sure what happened to us doesn't happen to other families." Meanwhile, the story was already spreading beyond the small mountain town. Lisa's cell phone video from the roadside had been shared dozens of times on social media. A local news reporter had heard about the incident on the police scanner and was already making calls to find out more details. By that evening, James's phone was ringing constantly. His supervisor at the FBI wanted to know what happened. His colleagues were calling to offer support. Local civil rights organizations had gotten wind of the story and wanted to talk. The Washington family's quiet vacation had turned into a very public incident. "I just wanted to take my kids to the lake," James said to Lisa as they finally checked into their cabin around sunset. "I never wanted any of this attention." "I know, honey," Lisa said, unpacking their scattered belongings. "But maybe some good can come from this. Maybe other families won't have to go through what we did." The next morning, James woke up to find news vans parked outside their cabin. The story had gone national overnight. FBI agent wrongfully detained while on family vacation was trending on social media, and everyone wanted to interview the family. James reluctantly agreed to speak with a few reporters, but he was careful to keep his children out of the spotlight. He didn't want Tyler and Zoe to relive the trauma or become the focus of media attention. "What I want people to understand," James told one reporter, "is that this wasn't about me being an FBI agent. This was about a family being harassed for no reason. If this can happen to a federal law enforcement officer, imagine what happens to regular citizens who don't have a badge to show." Back in Pine Ridge, the police department was dealing with a crisis. Phone calls and emails were pouring in from around the country. The mayor was demanding answers. The department's social media pages were flooded with angry comments. Officer Morrison submitted his resignation that same morning. He knew his career in law enforcement was over. The video of him handcuffing James was being played on news channels across the country, and his name was being mentioned in every story about police misconduct. Sergeant Coleman was placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. He tried to defend his actions, claiming he was just following protocol, but the evidence was clear. There had been no valid reason to stop the Washington family, let alone detain James. That Officer Hayes, who had tried to de-escalate the situation, was assigned to lead a new community outreach program. She volunteered to help develop better training procedures to prevent similar incidents from happening again. The FBI's Internal Affairs Division launched their own investigation. While James was the victim in this case, they needed to understand exactly what had happened and whether federal laws had been violated. The fact that a federal agent had been wrongfully detained made this a serious matter that couldn't be ignored. 3 days into their vacation, James received a call from the Pine Ridge police chief. "Agent Washington, I want to personally apologize for what happened to you and your family. Officer Morrison has resigned and Sergeant Coleman is facing disciplinary action." "Chief, I appreciate the call," James said, "but my concern isn't just about punishing these officers. It's about making sure this doesn't happen again. What are you doing to prevent this kind of incident in the future? The chief outlined new training programs, revised policies, and better oversight procedures. But James had heard similar promises before, and he wondered if real change would actually happen. The family tried to salvage their vacation, but it was impossible to forget what had happened. Every time they drove through Pine Ridge, Tyler would ask if the mean police officers were going to stop them again. Zoe had nightmares about seeing her father in handcuffs. On their last day at the lake, James made a decision. He would file a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Pine Ridge Police Department. It wasn't about money, it was about accountability and change. "Are you sure about this?" Lisa asked as they packed up their cabin. "It's going to mean more attention, more stress for our family." "I'm sure," James said. "If I don't speak up, who will? How many other families have been through this but didn't have the resources or platform to fight back?" 6 months later, the lawsuit was settled. The Pine Ridge Police Department agreed to pay damages to the Washington family and implement comprehensive reforms. All officers would receive bias training, new policies were put in place for traffic stops, and a civilian oversight board was created to review complaints. Officer Morrison was charged with violating the family's civil rights under federal law. He eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to community service and probation. His law enforcement career was over, and he would never be able to work as a police officer again. Sergeant Coleman was fired from the department and faced his own federal charges. He tried to appeal his termination, claiming he was just doing his job, but the evidence was overwhelming. The disciplinary board found that he had acted without proper cause and had escalated a routine traffic stop into an illegal detention. The story continued to resonate across the country. Police departments in other cities began reviewing their own procedures. Civil rights organizations used the Washington family's case as an example of why police reform was necessary. James was invited to speak at police academies and community events about the incident. He would often end his presentations by showing a photo of his children's faces during the traffic stop, scared, confused, and traumatized. "This is why we need to do better," he would tell audiences, "because every time we fail to treat people with dignity and respect, we're not just hurting them, we're hurting their children too." A year later, James received a letter from a young mother in another state. She wrote that after seeing his story on the news, she had successfully fought back against a similar incident that happened to her family. The police department in her town had apologized and changed their procedures. "That's why we did this," James told Lisa as he read the letter. "One family at a time, one department at a time, we can make things better." The Washington family never returned to Pine Ridge for vacation, but they didn't let the incident define them. They continued to take family trips, though James always made sure to keep his federal credentials easily accessible. It was a sad reality, but it was the world they lived in. Tyler and Zoe grew up understanding that not all police officers were bad, but that some people in positions of power could make terrible mistakes. They learned that speaking up against injustice was important, even when it was difficult. James remained with the FBI and continued his career in law enforcement, but the incident changed how he approached his job. He became an advocate for police reform within federal law enforcement circles, pushing for better training and accountability measures. The mountain road where it all happened looks the same today, but the Pine Ridge Police Department is different. Officer Hayes eventually became a sergeant and implemented many of the reforms that came out of the Washington case. She often tells new recruits about the importance of treating every person with respect, regardless of who they are or what they look like. Sometimes justice moves slowly, but it does move. And sometimes it takes one family's courage to stand up and say, "This is wrong," to create change that helps countless other families. The morning sun cast long shadows across the downtown business district as Dr. Amelia Richardson stepped out of her sleek silver car. She paused for a moment, adjusting her navy blue blazer and checking her watch. 2 o'clock sharp. She was always punctual, especially for meetings this important. At 42, Amelia had learned that first impressions mattered in the business world. Her outfit was carefully chosen, a professional blazer, matching slacks, and polished leather shoes that clicked confidently against the pavement. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something meaningful from nothing. Richardson Tech Solutions hadn't always been the multi-million-dollar company it was today. 10 years ago, Amelia had started it in her garage with nothing but a laptop, a dream, and an unshakable belief in her cybersecurity expertise. She remembered those early days vividly, writing code until 3 in the morning, pitching to clients, who sometimes looked surprised when they met her in person, and slowly building a reputation in an industry that didn't always welcome people who looked like her. But persistence had paid off. Her company now employed over 200 people across 3 states. Fortune 500 companies trusted her team to protect their most sensitive data. Government agencies sought her expertise. The garage startup had become a powerhouse in the cybersecurity world. Today's meeting at First National Bank was supposed to be the next big step. Amelia had been planning this expansion for months. The new West Coast office would create another 100 jobs and bring her services to tech companies in Silicon Valley. The numbers were solid, the business plan was bulletproof, and the loan approval should have been a formality. She had chosen First National specifically because of their reputation for supporting growing businesses. Their marketing materials talked about partnerships and understanding the dreams of entrepreneurs. Their website featured diverse business owners who had supposedly found success with their backing. The bank building itself was impressive, all marble columns and gleaming glass designed to convey stability and prosperity. Amelia had been here once before, 3 weeks ago, for an initial consultation. That meeting had gone well, or so she thought. The preliminary discussions had been positive, and today was meant to finalize the details. As she approached the heavy glass doors, Amelia felt the familiar flutter of nervous excitement she always experienced before big meetings. Not fear. She had long ago conquered that particular demon. But the anticipation that came with knowing she was about to take another significant step forward. The lobby was everything she expected from a premium banking location. Polished marble, floors reflected the light from crystal chandeliers. Expensive artwork adorned the walls, and comfortable seating areas suggested that clients were valued and welcomed. The entire space was designed to communicate success and stability. Behind the curved reception desk sat a young woman who appeared to be in her mid-20s. She was typing on her computer, occasionally glancing up at the phone that rang softly beside her. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore the kind of professional outfit that banks seem to require of their frontline staff. Amelia approached the desk with a smile, ready to announce her arrival. She had learned over the years that warmth and professionalism could open doors that might otherwise remain closed. Her approach had always been to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their position or role. "Good afternoon," Amelia said, pleasantly. "I'm Dr. Richardson. I have a 2 o'clock appointment with Mr. Mitchell about our commercial loan discussion." The receptionist looked up from her screen, and something shifted in her expression. It was subtle but unmistakable. The kind of look Amelia had seen before, though she always hoped she was imagining it. The woman's eyes moved from Amelia's face to her outfit, then back again, as if trying to process something that didn't quite make sense to her. Let me check on that," the receptionist said, her tone noticeably cooler than it had been when, greeting the previous customer, a middle-aged white man in a less expensive suit who had been waved through without question. Amelia waited patiently as the woman clicked through screens on her computer. She could see her appointment clearly listed in the calendar system. The time, the purpose, even the preliminary loan amount were all visible from where she stood. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Mitchell is tied up in meetings all afternoon," the receptionist said finally. "You'll need to reschedule for another time." Amelia felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach, but she maintained her professional composure. "I'm quite certain we have a confirmed appointment. I received a confirmation email yesterday, and we've been planning this meeting for 2 weeks." She reached into her leather portfolio and pulled out her phone, scrolling to the email confirmation. The message was clear. 2 p.m. appointment with branch manager Robert Mitchell regarding commercial loan finalization for Richardson Tech Solutions. The receptionist barely glanced at the phone screen. Well, things change. He's very busy with important clients today. The word important hung in the air like a challenge. Amelia had built her career on reading between the lines, on understanding what people really meant when they spoke in corporate code. The message was coming through loud and clear. Other staff members had begun to notice the conversation. A woman, in her 50s, approached from behind the teller counter, her expression stern and unwelcoming. Her name tag identified her as a senior employee, someone with authority in the branch hierarchy. "Is there a problem here?" the older woman asked, directing her question to the receptionist rather than to Amelia. "This woman claims to have an appointment with Mr. Mitchell, but he's not available," the receptionist explained, as if Amelia weren't standing right there. The senior employee looked Amelia up and down with undisguised suspicion. "Ma'am, this is a premium banking location. We serve established business clients with verified credentials. If you're looking for basic banking services, there's a community branch about 10 minutes away that might be more suitable." The words hit Amelia like a physical blow, but she had learned long ago not to show weakness in moments like these. Instead, she reached into her portfolio again and pulled out her business card. Heavy cardstock with raised lettering that proclaimed her title as Chief Executive Officer of Richardson Tech Solutions. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Amelia said calmly, offering the card. "I'm here for a scheduled business meeting about a commercial loan. My company has been working with your commercial lending department for several weeks now." The senior employee took the card, but barely looked at it before setting it aside. "Anyone can print business cards," she said dismissively. "We're going to need to see multiple forms of identification, proof of employment, bank statements, and verification of your business registration before we can even consider providing any services." Amelia looked around the lobby and noticed that none of the other customers, all of whom appeared to be white, were being asked for such extensive documentation. A man in a wrinkled shirt was being handed loan papers to sign without any additional verification. A woman in casual clothes was being cheerfully helped with what appeared to be a significant transaction. The double standard was so blatant it was almost surreal. Amelia had prepared for this possibility, had hoped she wouldn't encounter it, but had armed herself with knowledge about her rights and the proper procedures for handling such situations. "I understand you need to verify customer identities," Amelia said evenly, "but I notice that other customers aren't being asked for the same level of documentation. I'm happy to provide identification, but I'd like to speak with the manager about the specific requirements for commercial loan meetings." The tension in the lobby was becoming palpable. Other customers were beginning to stare, and Amelia could feel the weight of their attention. This was exactly the kind of scene she had spent her career trying to avoid, but sometimes the situation chose you rather than the other way around. The security guard, who had been stationed near the entrance, began moving closer to where Amelia stood. The message was clear, even if unspoken.